right, so my name's Daniel Hill. That's our own GeoStar Technologies, which is the company that owns the GabionSupply.com website. And we also do geosynthetic fabrics and some other steel products, all related to walls and civil construction. I'm gonna go ahead and mute y'all just so I can keep going, but if you have anything, you should be able to unmute yourself, or there's a little button you can raise your hand and I can stop and answer any questions. All right, so items we're going to go over, just types of gabions and the different mesh that make up those types of gabions, the ASTM standards, standard sizes of gabions, some of the included or optional accessories, as well as civil and erosion control applications and architectural applications. And then I have a few just kind of helpful notes at the end on gabions. So on the types of gabions, we have three main categories that we sell. We have our DuraFlex gabions, which are it's a double twisted wire mesh gabion. That's probably the most common in civil applications. It's been around in the US the longest. We call it DuraFlex because the wire, it flexes and gives a little bit more than a welded wire mesh. So the second type is a DuraWeld welded wire mesh. And the DuraWeld comes in several different size and finish options within the standard mesh. And so those can be used in the civil side, but then also are used a lot in the architectural side and a lot of specialty applications. And then our third option are our DuraGuard gabions. And the DuraGuard gabions are made out of polypropylene plastic. It's basically a UV treated geogrid panel that's cut to the gabion sizes and then sewn together with a marine grade nylon cordage. So, you get no degradation from salt water, as well as, no issue with UV degradation because it has carbon black in the plastic itself. So some detailed info on the DuraFlex. It's the double twisted. You can see in the picture there that it's the joints, instead of being welded, it's the wires are twisted together. It's similar to a chain link fence, except there's additional twist. It's actually turned 2.5 times. Like I mentioned, they're used in civil and environmental applications, and these items are more standardized items than the DuraWeld. So it's just standard sizes. They're generally in, all of the sizes are in stock. If it is a larger order, then we're looking at a 2 to 3 day lead time. The standard assembly is with tie wire, where you're actually sewing the seams together on once it's delivered and you're doing the final assembly. But especially if you get over 20 or 30 baskets, purchasing a hog ring gun can save you about 30% of your labor savings. And that's just from using hog rings and a pneumatic or manual hog ring tool. But the tools are fairly expensive. With the mesh details, the mesh size is measured kind of straight line to straight line. And so those are 3 1/4 inch by 4 1/2 inch. And the rock fill material for that is going to be a 4 inch to 8 inch stone fill. And then the wire size options that we have in a basket is going to be an 11 gauge galvanized or a 12 gauge galvanized with PVC coating. And then with the mattresses, which are going to be more on the erosion control side, those are going to have a slightly smaller mesh opening, a 2 1/2 inch by 3 1/4 inch. And that's available in a 13 gauge galvanized wire, as well as a 13 gauge galvanized with PVC. The DuraWeld mesh, the standard mesh that we stock is going to be a 3" by 3" square aperture mesh. And within that standard mesh spacing, we do have several different options as far as wire gauge and finish. But we also have custom mesh available where we can specify the aperture size of the mesh as well as go much thicker than our standard finish. And then we also get into stainless steel and some other finishes and material type. All of our DuraWeld baskets are made to order. So even though we're utilizing our stock mesh, we can do custom sizing. And so we can do dimensions in increments of 3 inches. They're used, the same as the DuraFlex as far as civil and erosion control applications, but then these are also used a lot more in the landscape and architectural applications. One of the, benefits of DuraWeld baskets is because they have that consistent mesh spacing, they are assembled with helical spirals, which you can see the corkscrews there on the picture. And what the helical spirals allow you to do is basically just screw in that seam, and then you just bend the top of the spiral over, down, and onto the basket. So the baskets themselves are a little bit more expensive than the DuraFlex, but the assembly is much quicker with what comes with the basket. So the standard mesh, like I mentioned, was the 3" by 3", and it comes in 11 gauge galvanized, 12 gauge galvanized with PVC coating, a 9 gauge galvanized, which is going to be kind of our hardiest stock mesh, and then we also do a 9 gauge raw steel, which is definitely more of for decorative. We call those our desert Gabions. There's no coating on the steel, so they do need to be used in more arid environments. And then with the custom mesh options, we can go from 1 inch up to 6 inch and can do square patterns, rectangular, really have a lot of options. We can go from 4 gauge to 13 gauge. The 4 gauge is going to be, almost 1/4 inch, so fairly thick wire. And then we have all of our standard finishes, but then we can also do grade 304 stainless steel and grade 316 L stainless steel. All standard Gabions, the construction method is standard across the industry. Everyone uses the ASTM standards. So the twisted wire mesh baskets, it's going to be under ASTM A975. Welded wire is A974. And basically those are going to give you your the shear strength requirements for the weld, or the tensile strength requirement for the metal, what size wires used for the selvage, how many dividing panels based on the Gabion size. And then there are additional ASTM standards for filling the Gabions, what type of rock, maximum lift size when you're installing it, as well as installation guides themselves. So on the Gabion sizes, the DuraFlex are definitely our most stock common items. The length, as you can see, generally it's a Gabion is divided into 3-foot long sections. So within, say, a 6-foot long basket, you're going to have a dividing panel in the middle at 3 feet. And so the standard lengths of baskets kind of mimic that size progression. And so we have all the different lengths up to 12 feet. The widths are going to be either a standard 3-foot or 4.5 foot, which can come into play for larger, taller Gabion walls. And then the height is 1 foot, 1.5 foot, or 3 foot, and then you just stack them on top of each other to get your desired height. And then the DuraFlex mattresses are similar, just going to have a larger footprint and a maximum height of 1 foot on those. With the DuraWeld sizes, Traditionally, they have similar dimensions to the DuraFlex as far as trying to figure out what to specify if you have the freedom in that. Um, those are still the most common sizes, but for smaller orders, a lot of times it's easier to get your specific size. So if you want a 33-inch long Gabion basket, we can definitely do that. And then the same on the height, we can get that within 3 inches. Just have to stick to an even mesh increment. So with Gabion Accessories, the hog ring guns and hog rings, those are definitely a time saver with the DuraFlex. You can see the top left corner picture and the bottom right corner picture. Top left is a manual hog ring gun, and the bottom right are the C rings or hog rings. And those are time savers with the DuraFlex baskets. We do have some customers that utilize those for the DuraWeld simply for aesthetics. So we'll basically ship them an unassembled basket, and then they'll use hog rings to assemble it. It's going to give it a little bit closer connection with the wire on the joints, and just not going to show the seam as much as having the spiral run down the basket would. As far as tie wire goes, on DuraFlex baskets, that's going to be utilized for sewing up the seams. When the baskets are delivered, the sides are attached to the base panel, and then you stand them up like you're assembling a cardboard box. With the DuraFlex, at that point, you would use the tie wire to sew those seams together if you're not using hog ring guns. And then you would also use that tie wire to tie the face panel to the back of the basket to give you that extra face support. The stiffening rods come with DuraWeld baskets, and those are the DuraWeld equivalent to tie wire. So they are preformed stiffeners. Generally, they're going to be 18 inches long. And so they would actually attach to the facing panel and then to the side panel, and would go around so that you're making a diamond with, if you were looking at it from a bird's eye point of view. And so that's, reinforcing the face of the basket just to reduce any bowing or bulging on the face of the basket. And then for assembly help, we do offer lid closure tools and corner closure tools, which are basically specialty pliers that are used for cinching corners together when you're building a basket, as well as getting the lid closed tight, because you do want to make sure the baskets are filled to capacities, especially if you're stacking more than one basket on top of each other. You don't want a void to be created in one of the lower baskets, and then all of a sudden you don't have an even base for that next basket to sit on. And then the last item mentioned on there is a Gabion guard. And Gabion guards are folded sheet of steel that's for a standard Gabion guard, it's going to be about 32 inches long and about 6 inches tall. And it slides over the edge of the basket so that when you're filling in the baskets with, say, heavy equipment, you can place the Gabion guards, and it protects the top of the Gabion basket itself while you're installing it, so that it's not bending it, you're not having to straighten it back up. It just dissipates that contact a lot better with the stone coming in. So into applications, definitely the most common and the oldest application for Gabions is a gravity retaining wall. There are a couple sample designs on the right there. And some of the general rule of thumbs for gravity walls is, the base course is going to be 2/3 of the height. So as you can see, it kind of steps in so that you have more mass at the base of the Gabion, just to prevent it from blowing out, because the force will be, highest at that lower level of the wall itself. Generally, you want the Gabions to be laid out lengthwise. As you're going up, you do try to alternate seams so that you have that interlock of the Gabions. And so that just kind of plays into account as far as choosing what dimensions of baskets and how to line them up and how many of each size that you'll need. Gabion walls, you can go up to 30 feet in height, but its optimal use is at 18 feet or less. And a lot of that is just when you go above 18 feet, you're having to bring in so much stone fill that it just doesn't really become cost effective to build a Gabion wall in that fashion. One of the ways you can go above that and combine, the look of the Gabion face is for an MSE wall, and that's just mechanically stabilized earthen wall. And what you're utilizing to help reduce the stress on the wall itself is reinforcement zone, and that can be through a steel mesh itself that gets laid back into the hillside, or it could be from a polyester geogrid being tied in. But basically, you're putting in some type of reinforcement back into the hillside that helps reduce the pressure on the wall itself and generate a larger reinforced zone. As far as erosion control applications, there's really a lot of different applications that you can get into, from filtering the water, which is what a bioswale will do. You can see that top left picture is an example of a bioswale Gabion application. And then you have channel lining, just where you might have erosion and need riprap in place, but you don't want the riprap to get washed away. And so the Gabion mattress provides a containment unit. And depending on how steep you're trying to go, it might be a mixture of Gabion mattresses and a wall on the side, just all of that site specific, and you can kind of interchange a lot of those items. Shoreline protection, that's one of the, I guess, fastest growing applications that we're seeing, especially around the Great Lakes, where they're starting to get a lot of shoreline erosion. That bottom left picture is from Lake Superior, and it was from a lakefront home, and they were losing, I think it was like a foot of shoreline a year. And so they put in Gabions just to basically keep from losing their yard a little bit at a time. You can also get into check dams, culvert outlet protection, where you're just trying to dissipate the water flow. And that's done just by having that contained rock. It allows a place for the water to reduce its velocity as it's exiting. On the architectural applications, as far as number of requests, this is definitely one of the fastest growing Gabion applications in the market right now. So we're constantly getting a request for landscape walls, screen walls, planters. You can see the top left picture was for a vegetable garden. They did a 1 foot thick Gabion wall and kind of created these raised garden beds. Then you have the bottom picture was a home, I think it was in Mendocino County, California, but they were trying to put in elements that would reinforce and provide stability, but then also blend it in. So they actually added like a dry creek bed that kind of tied in a natural environment with the Gabion mesh, the steel being involved in it. And then, we're also seeing more and more Gabion benches, as well as veneers. And, the veneer allows you to have that Gabion look, but using a much smaller volume of stone. Veneers are where we get into a lot of our common use for the custom mesh. Because when you are going with a thinner veneer, you do want a smaller fill so that you get a good fill area. So we do a lot of 2 inch by 2 inch or 1 inch by 4 inch rectangular mesh. And even though the basket itself is more expensive because, you know, it's more steel per square foot and it's custom production. A lot of times they end up either breaking even or saving money because they're not having to bring as much fill in. It's not as heavy of a load in the basket itself. And so it just gives them that look. With the smaller mesh, they can use a lot of specialty stone. So you can see in the middle picture, you know, it's got a smaller rounded stone. If that had been a larger mesh, you would see some bulging on it. But, you know, with the custom mesh, they got a really thin fill, didn't have to bring in a lot of extra stone for the project, and, you know, had a nice clean line, great finished look on it. And then for the Gabion fences, we have several different versions of those that people utilize. We basically supply the basket, and then you know, they use that as a building block to develop, I guess, what it is that they're trying to achieve. So the bottom picture, they were actually trying to reduce sound coming in, and so that's actually a fairly thick wall. I think the base course was 2 or 3 feet, and then had a 2-foot thick wall on the second course, and that really reduced the sound coming in from the highway that was nearby. Same thing with the fence applications applies to signs. We actually just got an order in this morning for someone doing a sign. On the Gabion fences, the stability can be from 2 different applications. You can have one where the thickness of the fence is more than half of the height. So that's kind of the general rule as far as a freestanding application. The other would be having an internal support post. So in that case, with the internal support post, you are having a post set in concrete in the ground, and then the basket slid on top of the post. And while you do tie the basket itself to that support post, the real interlock is happening from the stone being interlocked around that support post that's inside the basket. So just some of the general notes. Structurally, DuraFlex and DuraWeld are pretty much interchangeable, especially, you know, on civil applications. A lot of it depends on the aesthetics, the quantity of the baskets, as far as, you know, the assembly you're looking at. With the DuraWeld, you do have the thicker gauge options that will give you much less bulging on the face. The DuraFlex baskets are going to be cheaper, but they do take a lot longer to assemble, especially if you don't have a hog ring gun. With the DuraWeld, you know, all made to order, so easy to do, very custom sizes. Galvanized Gabions, that's definitely the highest volume of Gabions that we do, is the galvanized. If it is going to have substantial water exposure to fresh water, then we do recommend our PVC coated Gabions. And then the if it is salt water, then, you know, we would not recommend galvanized steel or the PVC coated galvanized steel. That's where we would, you know, utilize either a grade 316L stainless steel or our DuraGuard, the polypropylene Gabion baskets. And then as far as design life on baskets, you know, the ASTM design life is going to be pretty standard for civil applications, 50 to 75-year design life, but it is steel, so, you know, it is highly dependent on the site conditions. So, you know, if it has a lot of water that's constantly running through the face of the wall, that can affect the long-term life of the basket, and then also with, you know, the soil acidity and any, you know, stormwater runoff, what all may be included in that runoff. Just a quick note on some of the other Geo products. that we sell. We have our own line of uniaxial geogrid, biaxial geogrids, as well as some other items. So if you ever have any questions or applications with those, we can definitely help you out. All right.